The March 8th, 2022 Zoning Board meeting. This evening's meeting will be conducted in a hybrid format. The meeting is accessible in person in the third floor auditorium of the Nashua City Hall, 229 Main Street, and via Zoom at the link posted in all public meeting agendas. Attendance via telephone is available using the Zoom connection details. Minutes of tonight's meeting, as well as audio and video recordings, will be available later at nashua.gov/agenda center. Select the Zoning Board of Adjustment. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting, please call 603-589-3056 and they will help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. The chair is in control of the meeting. To the extent practicable and advisable, the board will follow the procedures as identified in its bylaws. The applicant will have up to 15 minutes to present their application and outline how it meets the points of law that are required for a variance or special exception to be granted. This will be followed by questions from the board. Next, persons wishing to speak in favor or with questions or opposition will be asked to speak for up to 5 minutes. If there are questions or opposition, the applicant will have 5 minutes to present a response. Finally, one and only one person with questions or an opposition will be permitted to speak again before the board deliberates and determines an outcome. A light timer is used generally, but right now Kate takes control of that to manage our speaking time. It will change from green to yellow when 1 minute is left, and Kate actually will notify us when the speaker's time has expired. If you are participating by Zoom and wish to speak when public input is requested, please use the raise hand option, which can be found under Reactions on a computer or the More menu on a phone. The chair will call you in turn. Please use the lower hand option when done. Please mute your microphone until called to speak. Note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call. Tonight we will be hearing requests for deviation from the Nashua Zoning Code in the form of applications for special exceptions and/or variances. A special exception is a request that seeks permission to do something that the zoning ordinance permits only under special circumstances. To grant a special exception, 5 points of law are required to be met. These are outlined in the application and will be summarized in board motions. A variance is a request that seeks permission to do something that the ordinance does not permit. Variances also have 5 points of law to be met, different from those for special exceptions. Per the City of Nashua bylaws and the State of New Hampshire revised statutes, a minimum of 3 or more affirmative votes are required to approve any application. In addition, this board will hear all scheduled cases if a quorum of 3 voting board members is present at this meeting. Any citizen has the right to contest the decision that this board makes. Should we make a decision that you believe is in error, you have the right to request a rehearing. A written rehearing request must be received by the City of Nashua Planning Department within 30 calendar days from the date of decision. Should this board not grant a rehearing request, you can file an appeal directly to the New Hampshire Superior Court. Please contact Mr. Falk of the Planning Department for more information. For this meeting, we have the following board members in attendance. And I'll do the roll call, I think, at the same time. Mr. Lionel.
Stephen Lionel is present.
Jack Currier.
Mr. Currier is present.
J.P. Boucher.
Mr. Boucher is present.
And Mary Ellen McKay. I am also present. And Jay Minkara.
Mr. Minkara is present.
We have the voting members present at tonight's meeting. All 5 members will be voting in all 5 cases. We have 4 regular members. Mr. Lionel is our vice chair. Mr. Currier is our clerk. Mr. Minkara is an alternate, but tonight he is voting in all situations, sir. Thank you. We just completed a roll call attendance. There are no members participating via Zoom, and so at this At this juncture, I would let people know that alternates are allowed to participate within the discussions on cases, but may generally do not vote if all 5 members are here. But since we have an alternate who is going to take part in all 5 cases, he will be taking part in all discussions as typical, and he will be voting. So I will read at this point the first case into the record. Owner, City of Nashua and Nashua Mill Yard Associates. The applicant is the Public Service Company of New Hampshire, DBA Eversource Energy. The address is 10 Whipple Street and L Pine Street. The City of Nashua and Nashua Mill Yard Associates, owners, Public Service Company of Nashua, DBA Eversource Energy applicant, 10 Whipple Street and L Pine Street, Sheet 77, Lot 5, and Sheet E, Lot 1487, requesting special exception from Land Use Code Section 190-115B for temporary and permanent impacts to the 75-foot prime wetland and wetland buffer of the Nashua River for land disturbance to allow public utility infrastructure improvements. This is the GIMU and RB zones in Ward 4. Is there anyone here present to speak on this case? If so, please step forward, and when you do, sir, please give your name and address for the record and speak into the mic. If you need to pull the mic closer, please do.
All right, well, thank you. Good evening, my name is Nick Golan. I'm a licensed engineer and principal with the firm TF Moran with the address of 48 Constitution Drive in Bedford, New Hampshire. I'm here this evening on behalf of the Eversource Energy team, joined in the audience by Mr. Kurt Nelson, who is a senior land use licensing and permitting specialist. Relative to the application that is before you, as was read into the record, is a special exception in regards to 75-foot wetland buffer impacts. This project, that is the 3891 line rebuild, was associated with prior approvals for the adjacent mill yard substation. If you're not familiar with that project, that was essentially a land swap between the city, adjacent stakeholders, to allow the relocation of the mill yard substation to promote economic development and also to provide Eversource the opportunity to provide reasonable power to the area with the rebuilds that they proposed. The relocation of that easement was reviewed very thoroughly by the city through City Council, the Mine Falls Park Advisory, the Nashua Economic Development Committee, the Nashua Planning and Economic Development Department, the Nashua Board of Aldermen, as well as the mayor himself as part of that land swap. So when we look at the graphic that is before you this evening, the area in which those impacts reside, the area in which that easement resides, was something that was vetted by the city in coordination with not only the city itself, adjacent stakeholders, that being the underlying landowner, as well as Eversource. It does just so happen that it does take place within this buffer zone, so we have done our best to minimize those impacts. Pole spacing is such to limit impacts to the wetlands themselves as well as the buffer. When we look at what the aggregate impacts are relative to this project, they are relatively small. We have 12 square feet of permanent wetland impact, 865 square feet of temporary wetland impact, 60 square feet of permanent buffer impact, which is relative to the proposed poles and the anchors themselves. It's not an impervious surface, but it is an impact, so it is considered permanent. And then the temporary buffer impacts. What those temporary impacts are for the wood matting that is used for access. The intent of that wood matting is to disperse the load of the construction vehicles that are required for the necessary installation of the poles. Once construction is complete, those mats are removed and Mother Nature is allowed to go back to her job, and the area is able to reestablish itself. There are specific notes on the TF Moran plans that have been generated that are consistent with the requirements of the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services relative to how those areas need to be restored. Given that this is within a primary resource area, it did require several levels of review on the state front. We have correspondence that was shared with your Conservation Commission at their meeting last week from Fish and Game as well as from Natural Heritage Bureau, giving the A-OK for the work to move forward under certain conditions, those conditions which have been added to the plan. Essentially, the conditions that were added were a clarification as to who we are to contact if a certain endangered species is seen. As I had mentioned, the Conservation Commission did review this at their last meeting, for which we received a favorable vote. There were 2 items they asked us to review relative to this application. One, that best management practices related to invasive species management and removal shall be included. Those identified with the New Hampshire Department of Agriculture's Best Management Practice Guidebook, particularly those related to Japanese knotweed and Oriental bittersweet. That information will be added specifically to the plan. There was also a request for us to at least evaluate the feasibility of installing an osprey nest at one of the sites. There is an economic cost to that, obviously, for Eversource, which gets passed on to the ratepayers. We realize ospreys are in many locations relative to the evaluation that was done for this particular site. Natural Heritage Bureau has no record of osprey in this particular vicinity, such that we don't believe it would be warranted to install such a nest in this location, but would leave that obviously to the board to consider that. Relative to the application components itself, I think they speak fairly well to the proposed impacts. I'm happy to read those components into the record if necessary, but it is essentially a reiteration of the components we've spoken to. I think probably one of the most specific items being item 7, describe any proposed site renovations, including but not limited to landscape lighting, pavement, structural changes, signage, access, and circulation. That really deals with the matting. Although we do have a fair amount of impact, it is primarily temporary, and it will have the opportunity to regrow and then be maintained with an appropriate vegetation standard. So I'll be short and sweet, and if there are any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Courier?
I'm just curious, like the application has Whipple Street, which is, shall I say, west of like the graphic we were just looking at. So I was assuming that the power lines are gonna, there are some near Whipple Street, and maybe that's why it had that address, but they're stretching on down to the mill yard. If you could just walk me through why we have a Whipple Street
So
address.
it's just really a case of how the assessors have identified the lots. So the lots in which the primary work, which is being taken place, or the primary location in which this work takes place, has those 2 as their physical address as listed by the assessor. I can't necessarily get in their minds as to why that is, but that's how it's listed by the assessors, and that's why we've indicated as such on the application.
Okay. And then on the graphic that Kate just had, if she could put that back up, of like the wetland area, was the power line going to run like right where her mouse is? Is it running where you see her mouse?
Correct. So if we want to consider east-west across the page, what we're going to have, if we look at the northeast quadrant closest to Spine Road, the line comes down to the south, then turns left to the west, and you can see where that area of yellow hatching is.
Yeah.
That area of yellow hatching is relationship to the temporary buffer impacts that are associated with the application. The line then continues through that right-of-way, heading in a westerly direction where it ties into the existing electrical infrastructure. You'll see that there is a portion of matting that runs north to south from the Cove area towards Nashua River, which is being aptly highlighted. That is just a matter of access. We got to get from point A to point B. There would be no line there, but in order for vehicles to get to that location, that is the most likely access route, and that's why we've defined it as such.
So the line doesn't actually stay on top of Spine Road? It
does not. So, yeah, I could see where there's some clarification needed. There is a dark, heavy-set line. That is just an access route, so
Yeah.
that provides the opportunity, or I should say direction to our contractor to stay on hard-packed surfaces, so
Yeah.
there's no negative impact to the land that surrounds
Okay.
it.
But the line runs kind of like just west. It doesn't cut back to the river where that
It does
patch
not.
is? Yeah,
It does
okay.
not. That'll be just for access, because otherwise, the line, which would be over a portion of the cove, you'd be talking about trying to mat within that area. It's an unreasonable and unnecessary environmental impact.
Yeah. All right, thanks for that understanding. I was a little mystified by it, but now I got it. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, sir.
Does anyone else have any questions? Mr. Minkara?
I don't see anything in the letter, but I wonder if you could speak to the rationale that the Conservation Commission may have had for their recommendation relative to the osprey nest?
I guess it's not an untypical request from your Conservation Commission. From my knowledge, it's something they're always looking for, environmental enhancements within a project area. Osprey are known to reside within the Nashua area, and the river itself is a logical place. We look at it from the standpoint of it's city land. I'm sure there are some legalities to the construction of that on city parcel. given that these right-of-ways were previously discussed through city channels and approved by the city council, I won't say it's late in the game to add the request, but it somewhat is, because we'd have to back up quite a bit to figure out whether or not that would be an acceptable item.
So it wasn't mitigation for a specific project impact?
It is not.
Okay, there's no further questions from the board. So I'm going to ask if there is anyone else here who would like to speak in favor of this application. Is there anyone online who would like to speak in favor of this application? I don't see anything, Kate. No. In that case, is there anyone here present who has any comments, questions, concerns, or opposition to this application? Seeing none, I will again ask if there is anyone on Zoom who has any questions, concerns, or comments or opposition to this application. Seeing none, hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Boucher.
Straightforward, I'm in support of the application. I think, again, it's for the benefit of the citizens of Nashua to improve this infrastructure. I think they've done a good job to minimize the impact. As far as the two recommendations, I know that we talk about the second one. I think the wording to me, and again, help me out, the applicant shall evaluate the feasibility of installing offspring nests. It doesn't say must install offspring nests, so I think that's really up to them, unless somebody corrects me on that. That's kind of how I'm reading it. So I'm not looking at that as a must-do. I'm just looking at that's just a suggestion that they look at it, and again, I think it's up to them whether or not they find it feasible or not to do that. So with that, I'm going to support the application, and if there's further discussion on that, I may have some more input.
Thank you. Mr. Courier.
I'm in support of the application. I agree with Mr. Boucher's interpretation of that stipulation, is that it's not a requirement, it's not a mandate, it's just a consideration, and I think the applicant has considered it. Doesn't look like it's very feasible, but they've considered it. So it's a mission accomplished in my point of view. I also just wanted to reiterate what the applicant said. The permanent wetland impact is 12 square feet, pretty minimal, and the permanent buffer is 60, right, 10 by 6, really trivial. The real impact here is just the matting to get to it, so that's not a lot of impact, so I'm in support of that.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel.
I'm also in support of it. The reasons my colleagues have already stated.
Thank you. Mr. Minkara.
I also support the application, and it would just add this, it is a necessary project, and it's been heavily vetted.
Thank you. And I also am in support of the application, and for all the reasons that all of my colleagues have mentioned. So now you can have a seat if you would like, or you can stand there. That is your call, sir.
I always enjoy to take a seat, so thank you.
Would somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Boucher, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the special exception for the City of Nashua and Nashua Milliard Associates, owners, Public Service Company of New Hampshire, doing business as Eversource Energy, applicant 10 Whipple Street and L Pine Street, Sheet 77, Lot 5, and Sheet E, Lot 1487, requesting a special exception from Land Use Code Section 190-115, Section B, for temporary and permanent impacts to the 75-foot prime wetland and wetland buffer of the Nashua River for the land disturbance to allow public utility infrastructure improvements it's in the GIMU and RB zones in Ward 4. We find that it is listed in the table of uses. We find that it will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. We find that it will not overload public water, drainage, or sewer, or other municipal system. We find that the special regulations, the wetland special, we find the special regulations fulfilled. We find it will not impair integrity or be out of character with the neighborhood or be detrimental to health, morals, or welfare of the residents. There is a March 1st Conservation Commission letter for the positive, their feedback was positive for this. There are two stipulations on that letter, and also through the testimony of the applicant that the wetland special conditions, all 9 items are being fulfilled. So with that, I make a motion to, for the special exception.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Lionel. Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Minkara, how do you vote?
Mr. Minkara votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. Congratulations, your special exception has been granted. As with any decision by this board, anyone can file an appeal within 30 days. If you have any questions, comments, and concerns, please refer back to Mr. Carter Falk in the Planning Department. Other than that, thank you very much for your time. And before I read the second case in, I was remiss in not mentioning that we have Mr. Carter Falk and Deputy Planning Manager for the city here present this evening, and we have Ms. Kate Poirier, the zoning liaison, also here present. So please accept my apologies. We don't want to omit either one of you. We need you. Okay, I will now read the second case into the record. Owner Timothy Coker, address 19 Brackenwood Drive. Description, Timothy B. Coker, owner, 19 Brackenwood Drive, Sheet B, Lot 2624, requesting variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17E1 to exceed maximum driveway width 24 feet permitted, 22 feet existing, up to an additional 14 feet requested on left side of existing driveway to access proposed third garage bay for a total width of 36 feet. This is in the R18 zone, Ward 8. Is somebody here to present this application? Would you please step forward, sir, and give your name and address for the record?
Hi, my name is Timothy Coker. I'm the owner and resident at 19 Brackenwood Drive in Nashua, New Hampshire. Thanks for listening to my request tonight. So my wife and I have been planning renovation to our home to add this third garage bay, as well as some additional living space above and behind the garages. As we were speaking with planning and zoning, understanding the setback rules, it was brought to our attention that our intended driveway would not meet the expectations of not exceeding 24 feet within 20 feet of the front property line. Our driveway is currently approximately 49 feet long, stepping back to the property line, which is about 11 feet from the street. That allows us roughly 38 feet to work with. Stepping back another 20 feet would allow us basically an 18-foot driveway. Our preference is to be able to essentially straighten out a full-size truck or SUV prior to entering the garage. So the request is primarily to be able to add a taper from roughly the 18-foot mark from the house down to roughly the property line. You can see Kate has brought up some of the sketches. I guess some key points here are that we don't intend to increase the width of the driveway at the road. It would be roughly 11 feet from the road that we would start the taper. This is consistent with several other driveways that we've seen throughout the neighborhood. I've provided some examples in the attachment to the application. I guess some other important points, the side setback to our adjacent neighbor on the left side, we're currently about 45 feet from our side property line. Adding the addition, which would bring in another 14 feet, we'd still be roughly 30 feet from our adjacent neighbor's property line. That would include the driveway. Both of our neighbors on, either side of us also have an extension to their driveway that currently, comes closer to their property lines, so either 14 or 9 feet, depending on which neighbor we look at. So again, I guess we feel this is consistent with driveways that have been installed throughout the neighborhood. I guess those are the key points. Are there any questions? And that'd be to walk through the attachment, which does have some photos of the driveways throughout the neighborhood, if you'd like.
Does any member of the board have any questions of the applicant? No questions?
No.
Okay. I'm going to ask if anybody present would like to speak in favor of this application. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak in favor of this application? I don't see anything. Is there anyone here present who would like to speak with any comments, questions, concerns, or in opposition to this application? Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak with any comments, questions, concerns, or opposition to this application? I don't see any. Kate, okay. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. And Mr. Coker, you're more than welcome to stand, or you can have a seat.
Okay, thank you.
And the floor is the board's. Mr. Courier.
I feel support for the application. A couple thoughts. While I'm not a fan of wide driveways, I appreciate how this design does not have overage in front of the property line, and the proposal is to swing over, starting at the property line. So, and I was struggling with it at first, but I also appreciate there are quite a few examples in the application of other probably non-compliant driveways that are wider towards the street. So I think this proposal would look fairly tasteful. It wouldn't look like a sea of asphalt. Again, I was struggling with it at first, but when, the proposal is quite a big addition. I mean, it's one bay, but there's a lot of house on top of that. But there's room for it, and there's some big houses in the neighborhood. So I also feel the applicant has put a lot of thought into the addition with the architect, and has thought this through a lot. So I'm not inclined to think that could we shave off a few feet here or there. I think the applicant's done an in-depth analysis and come up with the 20 feet from the garage and then start to angle over. So I'm in support, but I'm open to hear other opinions.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel.
Yeah, I'm kind of lukewarm about this. The neighborhood doesn't have a lot of three-bay garages, but the garage is not what's before us. And yes, there are a lot of these swoop driveways, most of which I expect were installed without a variance. Seems to be very common. I have one of those in my neighborhood as well. I'd probably support the application, but I'm not really happy about it. So that's as far as I'll go.
Thank you. Mr. Minkara.
I think I was in a similar place, but I do support the application, primarily because I think there is a real effort to minimize the impact, and I do appreciate that it is not wider at the street. It's 11 feet back, and I think that they've attempted to minimize the impact of that triangular area while still allowing access to that third bay. I also appreciate the thoroughness of the application, the other examples that were provided. So I'll support the application.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher.
I'll also support the application for all the reasons spoken to.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I will also support the application for all the aforementioned reasons. Would somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Boucher?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the area variance for Timothy B. Coker, owner of 19 Brackenwood Drive, Sheet B, Lot 2624, requesting variance from Land Use Code Section 190-17, Section E, subsection 1, to exceed maximum driveway width 24 feet permitted, 22 feet existing, up to an additional 14 feet requested on left side of existing driveway to access proposed third bay garage for a total width of 36 feet, seen in R18 Zone, Ward 8. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of property and the benefits sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. Again, the applicant has made every effort to minimize the impact. Again, the driveway opening width is not increasing. It's just within the 20-foot setback that there's going to be a taper that will start so that the applicant can access the garage straight on. We find that it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find it will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. We find that it's not contrary to public interest, and we find that substantial justice would be served. So again, I make a motion to approve the area variance.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Minkara, for your second. Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Minkara, how do you vote?
Mr. Minkara votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
And Mary Ellen McKay also votes in favor. Mr. Coker, that was a unanimous approval. Congratulations, your variance has been granted. As we've stated, anyone has the option to appeal any decision made by this board. They have within 30 days to do so. Should you have any questions as you continue forward in your progress, please refer back to Mr. Carter Falk in the Planning Department. Thank you very much, and have a good evening. Okay, moving right along. Case number 3. Owner, William Cronin and Catherine Crestapanis. Thank you, whoever gave that one to me. Applicant Tracy Trammell, 12 Farrington Road, William Cronin and Catherine Crestapanis, owners. Tracy Trammell, applicant, 12 Farmington Road, Sheet A, Lot 764, requesting the following. 1, special exception from the Land Use Code, Section 190-15, Table 15-1, Number 3, to allow an accessory in-law dwelling unit in existing basement. And 2, variance from Land Use Code, Section 190-32B1, to exceed maximum size of accessory dwelling unit, 750 square feet allowed, 778 square feet proposed. This is in the R9 zone in Ward 7. And is there somebody here to present the application? Please come up. State your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is Tracy Trammell on behalf of GM Roth, 12 Murphy Drive, Nashua. Do we have to do these separately, or is it all at once? The special exception of the variance?
Well, generally, the applicant speaks, and then we consider the applications individually, but you walk us through your application, and then
Okay.
the rest of it is our problem.
As far as the variance goes, our goal was to, as is always, is to stay within the maximum square footage of any ADU. We feel we did what makes sense in this case. We put the living space and the kitchen where the existing sliders are. We put the bedroom where the existing window is for egress. And there was an existing bathroom, which is going to be renovated, but we're going to keep it in the same place to avoid having to cut concrete and lay new drain lines and all that. And then what we did is we connected the existing bathroom space to the living space, and that put us over the square footage, the maximum square footage allowed, by 28 square feet. And that's what we're asking for the variance for. The special exception is for the ADU, and that, again, we're not using the entire basement space. There is access back into the existing house, there's access to the exterior, there's parking that's already on site, so it won't impact the neighborhood at all. And I think you've seen the plans, and so if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Thank you. And on the ADU, they have you seen, Sarah, the points of law, and do you agree to those, or do they need to be asked of you separately?
No. Let's see. The nature of the proposal is to remodel a portion of the existing basement into an ADU.
Let me see. This, thanks, Mr. Falk.
Okay. Sure. So the ADU is within the existing dwelling unit.
And you're here because it does not exceed, it does exceed.
It does
seven-
exceed 750,
That's why you're
yes.
asking for the variance, so we
Correct.
understand that.
Yeah. It won't change the appearance or the character of the house because it's all internal. All the renovation is internal. The owner will be living in the house. This will be for her parents. Additional off-street parking, there's already 4 parking spaces available at the house. And there's 3 cars that will be using those spaces. There is an interior door between the two, which is on the plans. It'll still be the ownership will still be maintained by the primary, and it's not a manufactured house, so I guess that one doesn't. Manufactured housing is supposed to.
And the owner will present the covenant to the city of Nashua.
Correct.
Okay, thank you very much. We just needed to have those stated categorically for the record.
Thank you.
Does any member of the board have any questions? Mr. Courier?
Maybe it's more of a clarification. You're not proposing any expansion, it's just that you're fitting the ADU into the existing structure, and in your opinion, to make that work well, you're, what do you say, 28 square feet?
28
over?
square feet over, yeah. There's existing finished, it's an existing finished basement. It does have a bathroom down there. Rather than taking that bathroom, moving it somewhere within the 750 square feet, which we'd have to core foundation walls, we'd have to cut concrete, we'd have to run new drain lines. In our mind, it just didn't seem reasonable, with the difference being only 28 square feet.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, I'll ask if there's anyone here present who would like to speak in favor of this application.
There's nobody else here.
Since there's nobody else here, no one can do that. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak in favor of this application? I don't see anyone in here. And again, there's no one here to speak with opposition, comments, questions, or concerns, so I will ask if there's anyone on Zoom who would like to speak against the application with comments, questions, concerns, or opposition. I don't see anyone either.
Madam Chair,
Oh.
Madam Chair, there was a letter.
Oh, we do have a letter.
In support from 10 Farmington Road.
Right here.
Yep, thank you. We have a letter in support. We are Ted and Sue Carey. We live right next door at 10 Farmington Road, as we have for the last 31 years. We've been very fortunate on Farmington Road, as neighbors have moved out and in. We have especially fond memories of Roger and Mary Brown, who lived next door for many years. Now we are glad to welcome our new neighbors and wish to state we have no objections to their proposed plans for the house at 12 Farmington Road and fully support the request for the special exception and variance from the respective land use codes. Ted and Sue Carey, 10 Farmington Road, Nashua. And they were in support of this application. Now that that's been read into the record, I'm going to close the public hearing and open the public meeting. And you may stand or you may have a seat, sir. Mr. Lionel.
I'm in support of the application. The overage on the square footage is really minimal, and it's working within the existing structure, so I don't have a problem with that, and I don't have a problem with a special exception either.
Thank you. Mr. Courier.
Similar to the way Mr. Lionel feels, I feel the application meets all the special exception criteria, and due to the existing structure, and it's not being built from scratch, and it's not being expanded, I feel the 28 square feet is warranted.
Thank you. Mr. Minkara.
I agree, and would just, add that I think to have to move the bathroom would be unreasonable for the sake of 28 square feet.
I agree. Mr. Boucher.
I also support the application for all the reasons spoken to.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also support the application for all the reasons, and I agree with Mr. Minkara that it would be very, very cost prohibitive for 28 feet. Is there somebody who would like to make a motion?
I'll do it.
Mr. Lionel, thank you, sir.
Okay, so we're going to do the special exception first. I'd like to make a motion on behalf of owner William Cronin and Catherine Crustapentis. The applicant is Tracy Turmel, address 12 Farmington Road, Sheet A, Lot 764, requesting a special exception from Land Use Code Section 190-15, Table 15-1, Item 3, to allow an accessory or in-law dwelling unit in an existing basement. This is in the R9 Zone Ward 7. This is listed in the table of uses. We have no indication that it will create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. It will not overload public water, drainage, or sewer or other municipal system because there's no additional water plumbing being done. It's just there's an existing bathroom there already. We have testimony that the special regulations are fulfilled other than the first one, about 750 square feet, and we have a variance in process for that. And the board believes it will not impair the integrity or be out of character with the neighborhood or be detrimental to the health, morals, or welfare of residents. We have testimony that that 8 of the 9 special conditions are going to be met, and therefore I make a motion to approve the special exception.
I have a second. Mr. Boucher, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is on the special exception. Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor?
Mr. Minkara, how do you vote?
Mr. Minkara votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
And Mary Ellen McKay also votes in favor. And now, Mr. Lionel, would you like to continue?
I will do the area variance, yes. Again, the owner is William Cronin and Catherine Crustapentis. Applicant is Tracy Turmel, address 12 Farmington Road, Sheet A, Lot 764, requesting variance from Land Use Code Section 190-32B1 to exceed maximum size of accessory dwelling unit, 750 square feet allowed, 778 square feet proposed. This is in the R9 Zone, Ward 7. The board believes that this variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property. The basement that's being remodeled is already there, and trying to reduce the square footage more would be unnecessarily injustice. The benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue other than the variance. The board believes this is within spirit and intent of the ordinance, that it will not adversely affect the property values of surrounding parcels, that it is not contrary to public interest, and substantial justice will be served. So I make a motion to approve the area variance.
And Mr. Boucher, thank you again for your second. Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Minkara, how do you vote?
Mr. Minkara votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
And Mary Ellen McKay also votes in favor. That is a unanimous decision. Mr. Cronin, as we've mentioned, anyone can challenge, appeal a decision made by this board within 30 days. Other than that, your special exception and your variance have both been granted. Should you have any questions, please re-refer back to Mr. Carter Falk in the Planning Department or Ms. Kay Poirier. Congratulations. Thank you for your time and your presentation.
Who seconded that motion?
Mr. Boucher. Okay, I will now read the last case into the record. This is 175 Ledge Street Realty Trust. Nick Shaw, Fast Signs of Woburn is the applicant. The address is 175 Ledge Street. 175 Ledge Street Realty Trust LLC owner, Nick Shaw. Fast Signs of Woburn applicant, 175 Ledge Street, sheet 87, lot 271, requesting the following variances from Land Use Code Section 190-101, Table 101-7. 1, to exceed maximum number of ground signs, 1 permitted, 2 existing. 2 additional ground signs proposed for a total of 4 ground signs. 2, to exceed maximum ground sign area, 100 square feet permitted, 110 square feet existing. An additional 25 square feet proposed for a total area of 135 square feet proposed. And 3, to encroach 4 feet 6 inches into the 20-foot required front yard setback for one of the 2 proposed ground signs. This is in the PI zone, Ward 4. Is there somebody on Zoom who is going to present this application?
Yes, I'm Nick from Fast Signs. I'm on the Zoom call.
Can you please, sir, state your full name and address for the record?
Yeah, so it's Nick Shaw, and our address for our shop is 155 New Boston Street, Woburn, Massachusetts. This is for 175 Ledge Street in Nashua.
Thank you. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you. So basically, Conres is seeking to have an existing street sign is there. We're seeking to have another street sign right next to it that helps identify the building for Conres. The existing street sign that's there is for the other building beside it, so it's really difficult for people that are trying to locate Conres for them to know where they're going from the main street. So that's why we proposed this street sign. And then we also have another sign specifically for Infor, which is pretty similar to the existing sign that already exists for Conres. So Conres has their own sign in front of the building. That just helps identify that you're going into Infor or you're going into Conres. So it's basically these 2 signs, and that Infor sign will be made pretty much identical to the Conres sign, and this existing street sign would be made very similar to tie in with the existing street sign that's there.
Okay.
So obviously the goal of this is just to help people, to help identify, when people are visiting Infor or Conres, they know where they're going. So with this street sign, we already have wayfinding signs that are there. So this existing street sign would help direct people into the lot, and then the wayfinding signs would bring them to either it's Conres or Infor, and then they have those individual signs, that would just help tie everything in and look really nice. So that was the idea behind all this.
Thank you. Do you have anything else you would like to state, or would you accept questions from the board, should there be any?
Yeah, could go to questions.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Shaw? Mr. Courier?
I was just, if you could help me understand, it looks like the existing sign is on the property line between number 175 and 165. And I guess I'm wondering, I don't think there's been any new construction in the area. Why, is there not a sign for 165, or how did we get here with this request?
Right, yeah. So that's the problem is, the other street sign that is there is for the other building. There's 2 lots in that vicinity. And this street sign, all the tenants over there are for that other building. So that's the intention behind having this, other one. This is for the other building that's there. Unfortunately, that sign is already built and it's from a different owner, so that's really their own thing. And then this that we're doing here is just trying to tie in with that to make it look as good as possible. But this is the only way that we really can do it because it's 2 separate owners. And that's the intention. We're not even allowed to really put it to the left of that existing sign, obviously because of visibility, people turning out on the street. So we obviously thought all this through, and we thought that this would be the best position for it. That at least is, a little bit further set back, but still there, so it's purposeful.
Okay, I guess, if you don't mind me, I'm going to ask the same question to Mr. Falk.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Courier. This is a little confusing and it's a little unique. If you look at the drawing here, you'll see the larger sign that says ARC and Fairite on it. And at the very top of that sign, it says 165. That's for the building next door to this. This all used to be one large property, and it was subdivided. The subdivision line, as you can see, that black thick line there, stopping where, Kate, if you put the arrow right, where that sign is right where the arrow is pointing, where Kate has the arrow. That sign pretty much straddles the new subdivision line that was done many, many years ago. The owners of 165 never moved it over, really. So what Mr. Shaw and Mr. Perkins are really asking for is for their own ground sign on their own property. The other sign there really doesn't have anything to do with this request. It's already there, it's existing, it just happens to be straddling the lot line. So they want their own ground sign in the front there. Unfortunately for them, there's a very wide right-of-way. To put the sign where they originally wanted it on the left side of that ground sign, the sign would have been half in the right-of-way. So Mr. Shaw and I talked about another possible alternative for location of that sign. And through a group kind of discussion, we thought the best thing would be for them to put it on the other side of that existing sign. So 175 Ledge Street is only going to have one ground sign in the front that's for their lot, for their property. And they also want that other small sign for Infor, and that's on the way inside of the property. It's about 200 plus feet from the Simon Street right away, and it's up an incline, and there's a very dense row of trees and landscaping there. So that sign really isn't visible. The only place you can see that sign is if you're on Ledge Street and you have a quick second to look over and you can see the structure. You may not be able to read it. So we thought the best thing for them to do is just, ask for it anyway. Both of these signs are about 12 square feet. They're not that large. So that's why they have that proposed sign for 175 there. It's because of, the 2 lots, and there's really no other location for it because the property line is really close to that existing 165 sign.
Well, I guess if the proposed sign is for 165 or
175.
Okay.
The existing sign that's there is actually for 165, which is the other lot in the other building. So it really doesn't have anything to do with this request.
like on
It
the
just
wrong
happens
side.
to straddle their lot line. So they're almost being charged for it, so to speak, because it's half on their lot. We didn't want to ignore it. We really couldn't ignore it since it really does physically exist straddling that property line, so.
So ideally, the 165 sign that's there now, in this situation, if this was being built out from scratch, would maybe be on the other side of the
Correct.
driveway?
Yeah, it would be on the other side of the driveway or another location, but they're in an unfortunate position where they're almost being charged for it, but it's not their sign and it's not part of their companies.
Thank you for that explanation. clear some of the fog.
Mr. Boucher, I saw your hand first.
Sir, just to clarify, Simon Street, any proposed sign there at the driveway?
Is that for me or is that for Carter?
No, that's for you.
Okay, all right. Not that I'm aware of. It's just these two signs here. That's it.
Just the Ledge Street side, nothing on the Simon Street drive.
That's right, right, Carter? Yeah, there's nothing on Simon
That's
Street.
correct.
I think Simon's, okay, all right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lionel.
Yeah, just to, minor clarification, the new sign is going to be entirely on the 175 lot. So it'd be maybe a few inches back or something like that, if the 165 sign is straddling the lot line, is that right?
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, well, I don't want to answer for you, Nick, but I believe the 175 sign will be all on their property, and there's not a setback issue for that sign either, because we only do setbacks from the front. They're going to put it back, so they're going to be, actually, I'm sorry, there is a small setback encroachment of 4.5 feet, but it's not from the driveway, it's from the front of the property, which is off of Ledge Street.
Well, I just wanted to make sure that the new sign is going to be entirely on the 175 lot.
It would be.
Yeah. I never knew there
Yeah.
were two properties there, two buildings there.
It was one at one point, and it
Yeah.
was subdivided.
Yeah, so, that's
So
it.
yeah, we want it as close to the other sign, I guess, as possible, because that ultimately means it's close out to the street. But whatever it has to be, within code. So if it's 4 feet, you said 4.5 feet, then that's what we would do.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for the applicant? Seeing none, there's no one here. Is there anybody on Zoom who would like to speak in favor of this application?
Yes, I would if I could. My name is John Perkins, and I'm the representative for Conres.
Okay, can you please
And-
state your name and address again for the record?
Sure, you want my home address?
Just a contact address.
Your address,
Okay.
whichever address you prefer to give us.
Okay, it's John Perkins from Continental Resources at 175 Ledge Street in Nashua, New Hampshire.
And you're speaking in favor, you're in favor of
Yes.
this application?
Yes, we very much need that. We have had instances of many of our customers just not being able to find us because we don't have a sign out in the street. And just to give you a little bit more history on that sign that's already there, when we bought the building back in 2007, there wasn't that many people at 165, so Continental used to have space on that sign that belongs to 165. In fact, the power that lights that sign actually comes from my building at 175. But so, and then 165 started getting more and more tenants, so then there was no space left for us to have our name on the other owner's sign. Hence, I need the new sign because I have people blowing by and then calling me from usually around the Ledge Street schools saying, I can't find you. So we need to have a sign up there, and the fact that I have to put it on the inside means that we'll have to keep more of the low brush that builds up in the summertime cut down through our landscaping company, but that's really not a problem for us. We just need the immediate on the street so somebody doesn't go by us, and they'll be able to know that they can come into our location. There's already directional signs on the property, and then there will be the other second sign will just be at Infor's front door, which their front door faces Simon Street. But there's a huge buffer of trees that you can't see through from Simon Street to see that sign. So it's more of the request was from the tenant Infor, because they wanted to have basically their own identity for when they have visitors coming in. It's easy to identify their front door. And that's really the reason for the additional signage.
Thank you very much. Excuse me, Mr. Courier.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the last speaker there, because when I was looking at this application, it seemed like you may not see the sign if you're on Ledge Street driving from Simon Street, but I think you were just saying that if you cut back some brush, you would see it, because I would think most of the traffic's coming from that direction.
Yeah, that would be correct. And like if you go right now, we just spent a fairly significant amount of money. We do every few years to have all of the shrubbery and everything through those trees. And in fact, if you look at, I think the photo now has it that Nick took was with all of the shrubbery cut down. Now, it's going to start to come back in the summer, but we're just going to have to basically push our lawn a little bit further down so that the low-hanging trees will be trimmed down by the landscaping company so that they'll be able to see the sign as you're driving up from the Simon Street side, and you'll still be able to see it. That's one of the reasons I think that Nick also said, I want to keep that sign as close as I can to the existing sign. I don't want to keep pushing it further up because it will be more difficult to see.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, is there anyone on Zoom who has any other comments, questions, concerns, or opposition to this application?
There's nobody else there.
Oh, well, it's a question that needs to be
Yes, it does.
read into the record. Seeing there's none, I will close the public hearing and open the public meeting. Mr. Minkara.
I do support the application. Frankly, I was completely confused by this until Mr. Falk's explanation. I didn't quite understand what was going on, but given that, I mean, I think it's, it's an unusual circumstance that they have a building and a property with somebody else's sign on it. Pretty clearly, they do need sign to identify their own property, their own business, and I think with the secondary sign, I think that really is necessary to have some sort of identification on the property for internal circulation, so I support the application.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher.
I also support the application. I don't think the applicant had really any other way to go besides this. I mean, short of moving a sign off part of his property or trying to come to some agreement and come for us for a larger sign, but then you have problems with two different owners trying to be on the same sign. So, sharing the same sign and arguing over space. So I think, again, this is probably the best way to achieve what they need.
Thank you. Mr. Courier.
I'm in support. Like Mr. Minkara, I was confused by this application and not at all feeling support for it, and I appreciate Mr. Boucher clarifying that there's no signage proposed on Simon Street, because I had the feeling there was, but when I was site walking it, it just led to further confusion. By the way, a lot of times, you can always call Mr. Falk, and if I'm confused, I do. I was just kind of a busy week, and I didn't have a chance to call him, or maybe Kate as well. But so I came here feeling insufficiently prepared for this, but after the explanation, I understand and I'm in support of it.
Thank you. Mr. Lionel.
I'm in support of the application. I have no further comments.
And I, too, am in support of the application. I can understand the logic. It's very difficult when you drive on that street to see not only a sign, the building, let alone a sign. I mean, it is, the foliage is really pretty dense. Would somebody care to make a motion? Mr. Boucher, thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the area variance for 175 Ledge Street Realty Trust, LLC owner Nick Shaw, Fast Signs of Woburn is the applicant, 175 Ledge Street, sheet 87, lot 271, requesting the following variances from Land Use Code, section 190-101, table 101-7. 1, to exceed maximum number of ground signs, 1 permitted, 2 existing, 2 additional ground signs proposed for a total of 4 ground signs. 2, to exceed maximum ground sign area, 100 square feet permitted, 110 square feet existing, and an additional 25 square feet proposed for a total area of 135 square feet proposed. And 3, to encroach 4 feet 6 inches into the 20-foot required front yard setback for one of the 2 proposed ground signs in PI zone, Ward 4. We find that the variance is needed to enable the applicant's proposed use of the property, given the special conditions of the property, and the benefit sought by the applicant cannot be achieved by some other method reasonably feasible for the applicant to pursue than the variance. Again, per discussion and testimony, that this lot was split in 2007. The existing sign for 165 is on the property line. This building, 175, currently has no identification from the street. Had lost that identification some years ago, and needs to be identified for the general public. The other signs will be more of the signs to indicate within the property the 2 different businesses that are there. We find that it is within the spirit and intent of the ordinance. We find it will not adversely affect property values of surrounding parcels. We find it's not contrary to public interest. And we find that substantial justice will be served. So again, I make a motion to approve the area variance.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Lionel, for your second. Mr. Minkara, how do you vote?
Mr. McCarr votes in favor.
Mr. Boucher, how do you vote?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Courier, how do you vote?
Mr. Courier votes in favor?
Mr. Lionel, how do you vote?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
And Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. Congratulations, Mr. Shaw. Your variance has been granted. As we've stated all evening, any member of the public, anyone can file an appeal within 30 days of any decision this board makes. Should you have any questions or concerns or comments, please refer back to Mr. Carter Falk or Ms. Kay Poirier. And again, congratulations on your variance. Thank you for your presentation, and have a good evening, sir.
Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Okay, now we will move on to the rest of the business of the meeting. We have no motions for rehearing. Does anyone see any regional impact on the agenda for 2 weeks from today, for the 22nd, I think it is, yes.
I don't think we have it printed,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah, we do.
oh, do we?
We don't.
Yep.
I
And
emailed
Kate
it to you
gave
today.
it.
Yeah, I saw it.
Oh, right. But I read it, the PDF, so I've seen it. Yes, it's here somewhere.
Is it in?
Yeah. She put it out,
Oh, I didn't get it, the printed one, but that's all right, because I read it.
I read the email she sent. I didn't see
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah, I don't see a printed one.
oh, she did send it, and I thought she put it out tonight,
No,
too.
we have tonight's agenda, but we don't.
Okay.
We don't think we have.
I have,
Yeah, I saw it online then.
oh, I printed it out.
Well,
I do, I print
I
it.
have it here.
no, I've seen it,
Does anyone?
I didn't see any regional impact.
Okay. So, do I need to take a roll call for the regional impact since we're all present?
We don't normally do that.
Okay, fine. On the minutes, has everyone had a chance to review the minutes?
I did, I didn't see anything.
Mr. Boucher, Mr. Courier, Mr. Minkara,
I did not see any issue.
and Mr. Minkara, you're also good?
Yeah, I wasn't here, so I'll abstain.
Okay, that's fine. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Mr. Boucher, and I think I'll second that motion.
Well, let me make a motion.
Well,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the February 22nd meeting minutes.
and I now will second that, sir. Thank you.
You got to take a roll call.
Mr. Minkara, how do you vote?
Mr. McCarr is going to abstain.
Thank you. Mr. Boucher?
Mr. Boucher votes in favor.
Mr. Courier?
Mr. Courier votes in favor.
Mr. Lionel?
Mr. Lionel votes in favor.
And myself, Mary Ellen McKay, I also vote in favor. That is 4 approvals and 1 abstention. And that, ladies and gentlemen, takes care of the business of the evening. And so, without further ado, I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
So 7:39.
7:39.